a lot of survivors get their trauma buried, and everyone forgets about it, but not the survivor. I had a rare, privileged situation where my trauma became trending. And what happened out of that was a lot of people making money off of my trauma.
Hi, my name is Cheyenne, and I talk about whatever I want on here. And today, I'm sick, but I still want to talk about this thing that I've been working on. Started off as something that I think most people would assume is like petty, not even influencer drama, but like former child star drama. There's some interesting like broader themes here that I want to talk about, and just like, I don't want to say a pattern of behavior, but I just found a lot of interesting things while I was looking into this, so it became a lot longer than I was anticipating. We're going to get into what the title of the video says about trauma, trending, and allyship for survivors, and all this stuff is what we're going to be talking about today. So, over the past decade, the realities of trauma, just mental health in general, have definitely become more mainstream and more accepted to talk about. We're not all the way there, but we definitely made some progress. You might know it firsthand, or you might know people in your life that deal with these things, or also celebrities are talking about these things in a way that there wasn't before. I mean, I'm just thinking back to when I was in high school over 10 years ago now at this point, and it definitely was not on the same level that it is today. But whenever you have awareness being brought to an issue, you have people wanting to make money off of things, exploit the thing, because we live in a capitalist society, and that's what they do. And the media is a great way to get messages out there, educate the masses, make things like this more mainstream to the everyday person, but it also has its flaws as well. When you have your traumatic story and it's in the media, think of this with like true crime and like people who are affected by true crime cases. When that's in the media, it's like it's no longer your story that you have control over telling. Somebody else is telling it for you, probably making money off of it. Yes, the awareness, but also there's the downside to it. In the 2020s, with the rise of TikTok, every single person can have a platform pretty much. If you get right in there in the TikTok algorithm, you can be a normal person, and maybe even hundreds of thousands of people are going to see what you have to say. And you can edit it however you want. You can tell your story in exactly the way that you want to tell it, barring like limitations of the platform. On TikTok, you have a lot of people using grape instead of other words. Before the 2020s, it was a little bit different. It was still definitely this, people were able to speak out more, culminating in the Me Too era in 2017, 2018. So the Me Too movement was a reckoning. It was pointing out these prolific predators in the entertainment industry, and it was also kind of talking about how these people have been able to fly under the radar. Well, under the radar, it's an open secret, but be able to not receive any consequences for their actions for so long. So these huge stars, these household names are coming out and they're saying that they have this story that they have to tell, that they're affected by this thing, and it suddenly becomes more real to people. Maybe that inspires people to look in their own life and see ways that they've been abused that they didn't even recognize at the time, but maybe now they're coming to terms with it. And like, this movement had a profound rippling effect over several industries, not just the entertainment industry. If you go on the Wikipedia page, which I had to refresh myself on what years this happened because everything's a blur, but you scroll and you'll see all the different industries that have had like these prominent reckonings happening, and it probably in other industries that aren't on that list that just, didn't make the news as big as these other examples. So as much as men like to rewrite history and, call things being Me Too'd, as if like, the most prominent person to receive consequences from the Me Too era is Harvey Weinstein, and like, he's been convicted and there's evidence and all this stuff, like, so that's always been weird to me, but logic is not their strong suit. But then in the following years, TikTok is rising in popularity, especially around the pandemic, and now it's like permanently altered the social media landscape and just like media and how information is exchanged in general. Now we have, for example, regular everyday citizens having to get on TikTok and apologizing for something like The clip that I'm going to use as an example is a woman who said that writers should put their work in ChatGPT to get a rating on their writing, and people went in on her for this.
So this is the apology that came. Wait, really? This only has like 900 likes?
No, she wasn't a TikToker before this, but she had to deliver. This is a big theme of today, having to deliver an apology as a regular person.
About a video I posted a few days ago telling writers you could use ChatGPT to get feedback on the first page of your manuscript. I really regret posting it.
It's like, what is going on? Like,
what the fuck? Yo, what happened? So, like, did ChatGPT kill someone and I'm missing, like, what? Like, it's bad, yes, but, like, not this bad.
The prospect of anybody being able to turn on their phone and address thousands, hundreds of thousands of people is both scary and liberating because, like I said before, awareness is a good and a bad thing. So recently, Nikolas, former cast of Zoe 101, is one of the main players in our story, and she talked about what it's like to have this traumatic story that you're telling to the media, like what that's like in her experience.
Media outlets sugarcoat your trauma. They don't really ever tell the whole truth that you told them over the phone or over a Zoom interview. But they'll let the survivor go through months of re-traumatization, sometimes never even seeing the person's face on the other side. They reach out for comment to the other side, right? And the lawyer, these very powerful lawyers, will then send 20 plus pages of threats, really, to the publication to make them bury the story.
Anyone can tell their story now. They can be heard without having to unload all that trauma onto a stranger, not even a friend or a therapist or, you know, a person that you might want to share your story with, a more accepting environment, but this other entity entirely. The journalist is not your friend. And although there are plenty of journalists who do treat their interview subjects with like a lot of respect, a lot of care, that's not necessarily required of them. In fact, they are required to like get both sides of the story and make sure that they're, you know, maintaining that journalistic integrity. Right now, we are in a child star tell-all phase. The kids that we grew up watching are now at an age where they're reflecting and healing from their past. And with this light being shown on the exploitation of children in the entertainment industry, you know, we're in a time where people are trying to loosen child labor laws in certain states. So hopefully, you know, showing a light on the entertainment industry can also show the light on children being exploited and workers being exploited just in general. It's things that you've heard before from like highlights, from headlines over the years of, you know, similar stories of people going crazy and blah, blah, blah. But I think now we are approaching these conversations from a little bit of a different angle, where in the 2000s, where you have Britney and Lindsay and Paris and all that, it's like the country's laughing at them instead of thinking about how they got to where they are. So for millennials and Gen Z, this is a concept that's pretty familiar because, like I said, we've seen the effects of child stardom for pretty much our entire lives. Like I said, it didn't start in the early 2000s, definitely in the 90s and 80s, there's child star issues. Drew Barrymore, was in rehab at 12, 13. So it's not a new phenomenon by any means, but it's just like, as there's been more and more media coverage of it, and also more and more child stars because teen programming started becoming more of a thing. But again, I feel like it's being, with the more of an acceptance of mental health and trauma and all that stuff, we're now looking at it from a different angle. These tell-all phases that happen in the media, that's happening right now, are extremely important, not just for the healing of the individuals involved, but to shine a light on these systematic conditions, like since the beginning of there even being child stars. There's a lot of good that can come from bringing awareness to issues, but what does that mean for people who don't have these large movements behind the things that they're dealing with? Like, for example, a lot of people might stop thinking about conservatorships now that Britney is free and now that things are hopefully getting better and things like that. But for the people who are under conservatorships and have personal dealings with them, that's not going to go away from them. What else happens when trauma becomes trending?
No one reached out to me in 2019 when I came forward about Dan Schneider. I came forward, and so I just wanted to get the information out. And so I went on Instagram Live and told a lot of my story about Zoe 101 and Dan Schneider, etc. And nobody came to me about it. No one. And, you know, fast forward when Jeanette McCurdy's book came out, and well deserved. That was a long time coming. Once I read Jeanette McCurdy's thing, you know, instead of thinking about my own book deal or like my own YouTube channel, I was like, I'm gonna go protest fucking Nickelodeon because fuck Nickelodeon. I'm so over Nickelodeon. I'm so over fucking Dan Schneider. And now I got it confirmed that it happened. Someone else felt the same way by this person. And I was already protesting before, but I went out into the streets and I protested Nickelodeon. And what came out of that was my introduction to Christy Carlson Romano. She reached out to me and, you know, for sure, because I was trending. Christy was someone who prospered off of me. My trauma was clickbait for her. And to be honest with you, a lot of people's trauma or vulnerability has been technically clickbait for someone like Christy Carlson Romano, you know, which is very wild to think about that trauma can be trending and when it's not, you know, no one really cares about it. It still blows my mind that that's a thing.
So we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but let's formally introduce our main player today, Christy Carlson Romano, a name you may or may not be familiar with depending on what generation of Disney Channel you watched growing up. The Disney Channel started in 1983, and I think they started doing the programming that they would become known for in like the mid-90s, or I haven't written in my notes 1997 actually. And that's when they shifted more toward the tween focused demographic, which wasn't necessarily targeted in like dedicated programming at that time. There was a lot of like kids content and family content, not something specifically targeted towards that demographic. And Even Stevens, where Christy Carlson Romano is from, was actually the first of that like sitcom style Disney show that would go on to become popular and something that they're known for. Even Stevens premiered in 2000 and ran through 2003. And then also in that same era of Disney, Lizzie McGuire started shortly after, That's the Raven started shortly after, and then Field of the Future. Remember that show? I think my neighbor is looking at me through the window, but. So Christy grew up as a Broadway kid before landing her role as Ren Stevens on Even Stevens, the older sister to Shia LaBeouf's character, actually. We'll get back to that. I think she said she was 14 when she started like that whole auditioning process and then getting hired onto the show. And then by 2002, Even Stevens is about to wrap up. She filmed Cadet Kelly at this point. I think she started voicing Kim Possible at some point here. By the way, Kim Possible, the most iconic animated show on Disney Channel. And then also if you scroll through her credits on like IMDb or Wikipedia or whatever, there's a lot of other voice acting things and like ABC Family movies and things like that. She also continued her Broadway career after this ended as well. She's in Beauty and the Beast, I think right after this stuff with Disney. So similarly to Ariana Grande, for example, she's experienced child stardom in both Hollywood and the Broadway scene as well. And Christy, being a child star, shares some markers that are very common with her peers. She has spoken out about being sober from alcohol. In earlier videos, she opened up about her money being mismanaged, which is huge with child stars. And then also when she finally got access to her money, not having the financial literacy to know what to do with that. Christy has also been candid in her earlier videos about the concept of relevancy and kind of like her whole thoughts on that. I didn't find that video to be like cringe or weird or anything. I thought it was a really interesting kind of look into relevancy and how to feel about it. Maybe people could say she was coping in that video. And you can really tell through her content that she wants to be a better mom to her own daughters than she experienced. So like, I don't want this to be constructed as everything Christy does is bad, blah, 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 because I don't think that's productive, and it's also not true of the situation. The purpose of this video is more to analyze mistakes and how we can all be better in our advocacy for things that we're an ally to. We're gonna keep that in mind while talking about Christy. I'm gonna try not to get too petty because some of the stuff is funny. I mean, like, come on. She gets very upset though if you make fun of her. So in 2019, That's when she started her YouTube channel. The first wave of content was Christy's Kitchen Throwback, which was a cute little series with former stars or former child stars and stuff from Nickelodeon and Disney. And it was actually very well produced. You would think that it was like some company was behind it, like BuzzFeed or something like that. But it was, I'm pretty sure it was just produced by her and her husband. And they both run their podcasting company now. The first episode of Christy's Kitchen Throwback had the guy who played Ron, what's his name? Will Friedle, I think. And that had like over 2 million views or something like that. Like, it did really well. But and like anything on YouTube, views are gonna go down eventually. I used to watch video game walkthroughs growing up, and like part 1 would get a ton of views and then it would just fizzle off toward the end. So that's gonna happen with any series. Really, podcasts are the only thing where you're not gonna necessarily have that drop in views. Christy also vlogged in the early days before the infamous walking and talking in the forest vlogs. And in some of the titles, she would clickbait herself as Kim Possible, which I thought was an interesting choice because it also didn't really seem to change the views necessarily. And from the beginning of her channel, like, her channel is centered around having guests. Even Joey Graceffo's thirsty ass was on her channel twice, by the way, at least twice that I remember. And this is not inherently exploitive or like necessarily clout farmy or whatever. Collaboration is a good strategy for growth, and like, she had a concept behind it. But when you have such a heavy reliance on guest features, that can make it difficult for you to form a personal connection with an audience, which is also very important for growth and sustained viewership. When Christy didn't have guests on Kitchen Throwback, she had a series where she was still in the kitchen, but she was like cosplaying various celebrities, maybe the celebrities that she wished that she could have on her channel, like some sort of manifestation ritual. And I mean, the cosplays were pretty good, so not too mad at it. But these videos would also make a fraction of the views. Then react videos made their appearance, and the thumbnails kind of looked like Fine Brothers-esque. And starting in February of 2021, the show would then be called Snacks and Reacts, where she wasn't really doing Kitchen Throwback anymore, was kind of going into this direction. And this switch happened, I think, because Kitchen Throwback was hovering around just under 100K views for a while. Obviously, you want growth and things like that. And then she uploaded a video, the Snacks and Reacts thing, with Candace Cameron. How do you say her married name? Bray? I don't remember. And also I don't really care because apparently she's not a great person. But that video got a few 100,000 views, and then she kind of went down that route after that. But then soon after, the views would go back to where they were before. And not only guests being a tricky thing for your platform, but nostalgia as being the basis for your platform is really tricky to sustainably use as a draw. Because at the end of the day, nostalgia is a novelty. It's profitable, obviously. I am a millennial. I know how profitable nostalgia is. We are very affected by it. But for how long is the question. Okay, so if you're a former child star and you want to make content, you want to bring in the views, nostalgia is good, but it's not lasting in viewership numbers. What else can I do? I got it. Mr. Beast clones seems to work for everyone else on YouTube, so why not try it? Okay. Well, that didn't work, so enter the expose. By August of 2021, Christy's entering what I have called in this script the tell-all genre. And what do consumers love besides nostalgia? They love drama. They love tea and spilling the tea. So when you combine the two, now you have great clickbait. Articles could be written about the things that you talk about. Christy's first video in this walking and talking Austin Park series got a ton of views for the channel. Again, we have a huge spike after kind of a plateau. And also in 2021, during the same time, we started to see a rise in child stars from our childhood speaking out about their experiences a little bit more. More people were coming out, so like the numbers were more there. Because usually it's like one person will say something here and there throughout the years. So there definitely has been a movement for recognizing the exploitation happening in like family vlogging as well, that I think kind of ran parallel to this and kind of helped this. But some of the major events that I remember on the celebrity side of things from this era was Alyson Stoner's open letter that we're going to talk about. Jeanette McCurdy's also teasing her book during this time, and then because it's going to release in 2022. And then also the Free Britney movement is gaining a lot of momentum in 2021. Speaking of Alyson Stoner, let's introduce one of our players. Alyson Stoner started acting at a very young age. They also had that recurring guest role on Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, and then also voiced Isabella on Phineas and Ferb, another super iconic Disney animated show, by the way. Like Kim Possible and Phineas and Ferb are probably top 2. So the Toddler to Trainwreck Pipeline is an op-ed written by Alyson Stoner for People magazine. There's also a video component, which I'll show the clips of. But even though child stars going through it is not a new concept, every time it comes back up in the news cycle, I feel like people are surprised. Or they're kind of surprised that this is still happening. Why is that? Even though celebrities are like at the forefront of our culture, and like I said, they can represent a lot of the things that we deal with as normal people, their struggles aren't necessarily something that we're privy to, unless they're resulting in a huge public meltdown or something like that. This is exactly what Alyson addresses in the op-ed.
I narrowly survived the toddler to train wreck pipeline. In fact, nothing was designed for me to end up normal, stable, alive. The toddler to train wreck pipeline is a notorious and thriving industrial complex around child entertainers. Expertly constructed, and it's bolted in place by censoring the harm happening behind the scenes, manicuring aspirational lifestyles and outcomes, and then watching young lives tragically implode, as if they are an isolated problem. Now, this does not dismiss their personal responsibility or negate the positives and privileges that accompany the spotlight. Simply, the records are consistent. How can children unwittingly copy and paste the same horror stories, cries for help, and humiliating spirals? How come there have been no signs of improvement for centuries?
Alyson talks about the mental consequences that happen as a result of acting when you're at an age when your brain is still figuring out what's real and what's not. It begs the question, like, do we also underestimate the effect that this can have on adult actors? Probably, right? I think it's pretty likely that what Alyson's describing would affect anybody at any age.
First act, scene 1, the audition room. At 6 years old, I enter a sterile white room where a stranger stands apathetically behind a camcorder on a tripod. On cue, I perform the scene. This morning, I'm being kidnapped and raped. Ending in the fetal position under a chair with my body frozen in fear, I stand up, wipe my tears, and thank the stranger for the opportunity. I walk to the car, ruminating over my performance, comparing my screams to the other kids I heard from the waiting room. Now, as with many parents in this unusual situation, my mother is not versed in how to help me regulate my nervous system. I remain catatonic on the first half of the drive until I remember we're on the way to a second audition for a Princess Toy ad. So on the spot, I manually alter my mood, my personality, and outfit so I can win over a new stranger with a camcorder.
Since entertainment is an industry like all others and is fueled by the capitalism machine, the child's well-being is not prioritized, just like your well-being is not prioritized at your job, sorry to break it to you, outside of whatever potential lawsuit you might be able to do if it is unsafe. However, also, the threat of lawsuit does not stop OSHA violations from happening. That's still a very common thing. They're probably not going to go reported, though. Child labor laws have an interesting history in this country and even into the current day, as we talked about earlier. Child labor in the entertainment industry seems to have been kind of a blind spot in those pursuits. There are regulations, but as Alyson's going to describe, they're not in every state, and there's ways to slip through the cracks. The hours that you're allowed to work, it's not like all the jobs that you have are going to go towards those hours. It's like, oh, for this job, I can only work this much hours. But also, what if I take a side gig here? And now you're working more than you're technically allowed to. And like I said, we're not just talking about the screen here. We, right now, in December, when this is being filmed and uploaded, we are in Christmas Carol season. In every state, every single state, I was going to say every 50 state, every single state of the 50 states in the United States of America is having at least one Christmas Carol production. And unless it's a volunteer, like community theater type thing, this is an acting gig for these children.
Scene 2, child labor laws. I am 12, and I am a machine. I'm currently contractually obligated to complete multiple overlapping projects. While some companies stay within the legal range of working hours for minors, many do not. Regardless, set conditions are inappropriate and hazardous. Did you know that according to the US Department of Labor, 17 states still don't have any regulations in place for child entertainment in 2021? Yet all 50 have working child performers. Adding to this, Zero Productions acknowledged that after their shoot, I will go to another, record an interview during my lunch break. Meanwhile, agents are encouraging me to look at early emancipation so I can work longer hours. This is going to increase my hireability. My body is medically undernourished and chronically stressed, which later will evolve into severe eating disorders, adrenal fatigue, and mandatory bed rest.
And when Alyson is lucky enough to see all this and realize that they need to prioritize their health, they're inundated with messaging from everyone saying if you take this time out for your health, your career is going to be over.
The grief, trauma, and stress overtake me like a tsunami, and I admit myself to rehab against the guidance of my team. They continue to send me auditions while I'm on bed rest. I'm not here for drugs or alcohol. I'm here because I'm at least 20 pounds underweight, and I'm daring to believe that my health matters, even if it feels like I'm the only advocate for it. Though I'm not without scars and ongoing struggles, I'm still one of the most fortunate cases. I had access to a therapist who saw past the enchantment of fame and taught me to safely re-inhabit my body. By some inner mysterious force, I committed to deep self-work and constant healing as my rebellion. I dared to lose everything I'd worked for and walk away long enough to gain paradigm-shattering insight. These privileges are not equally available, distributed, or even encouraged. The opposite is regularly enabled.
I think it's also important to mention that not every child star is going to have the same experience. We know this through the media surrounding these child star tell-alls. Some stars recognize their privilege in their own situation, and they make sure to bring a light to the fact that, other people have had it worse than them and that they're an outlier in not having these bad experiences. Biggest example I can think of is the Sprouse twins. They'd have talked about how their female counterparts experienced sexual harassment and things that they didn't experience growing up in the industry, even though there are boys who do experience that growing up in the industry. Some stars, on the other hand, Josh Peck, don't recognize their privilege and how differs from their peers. And it could be because they haven't unpacked their own trauma. Or it could be that they didn't have these experiences, they don't believe that they happen to other people, or they are lying to protect people that they haven't witnessed things that have happened. That is also, could also be a thing. There are also some people in Zoe 101 cast who have defended Dan Schneider in the past. And maybe Gibby. Has Gibby from iCarly, I think that actor has defended Dan Schneider. I mean, maybe if he hasn't, I don't want to speak out about him, but there are some Nickelodeon actors that have praised Dan Schneider. So there's this whole conversation about what does that mean for media outlets that report on the lives of former child stars. If you're propping somebody up in an interview, like Josh Peck, who has not experienced these things, in fact, goes out of his way to say, oh, he's kind of a great guy. So if that person's either knowingly or unknowingly kind of denying the trauma of others, does that mean that you as the interviewer are not sensitive to those traumas because you also interviewed somebody that's saying that they don't exist? Like, what's your responsibility there as either a podcaster or a publication? Everyone does have a story and everyone can tell their story. So what's the line? And that's one of the big questions today that we have when it comes to dissecting Christy's content. Speaking of that, let's go back to the evolution of Christy's YouTube channel. The rise in these stories of child actors speaking out and the increase in views of drama content, I think this is also around the time of like the Dramageddons and things like that. These are going to influence the direction that her channel is going to take. So, like I said, she starts this series that's been memed on the internet, walking in a park in Austin where she lives now, talking about random topics that she says have been requested or whatever. And she also tells vulnerable stories of her life. So in her first video in this series, The Truth About the Disney Channel, Christy's not even really exposing Disney at all. Really weird. So I really want to show it to you. Because I remember watching this video when it came out at the time. But now that I've watched it with a new set of eyes, not even just like how I feel about her, that's not what I mean. I just mean with like, I guess, where we are now in the sense of people exposing Disney Channel and exposing Nickelodeon. I'm like, oh, this is what she had to say? So let's watch.
And I'm finally ready to talk about it, so here's what it's like working for the Disney Channel. First of all, I just want to say it's amazing. There's a lot of life-changing aspects to working for DC. They're good people, especially the people in charge. I think that they really want what's best for their talent, because without their talent being happy and healthy, at least for the time that they're contracted, you know, then they can't work properly.
And that editing on that clip is like a Marvel, like, or Disney, like Marvel. You know how they like weirdly edit their clips for social media?
This is the first time for me in the Marvel universe.
Anyway, so these kind of disclaimers kind of remind me how I used to talk about my ex, like, oh, he's a good guy, he loves me, he just has an interesting way of showing it. And again, I don't want to make like a blanket statement that every single child star ever was abused. My cat is hanging out. I don't know if you can see her. There she is. Hello. I don't want to make a blanket statement that every single child star ever has been abused or whatever. And I'm sure that there are good things that come from working on the Disney Channel. A lot of people have actually said that they have had these bad experiences, but they've also had some good experiences as well. But it's so weird to open this where you know your audience is expecting tea and saying, I just love them, guys. Like at the same time when people are talking about how damaging that time was for them and how like traumatizing it was for them and how they felt like the network was largely responsible for that. So while this is hopefully authentic to Christy's experience with the company, it's just, you know, kind of interesting to talk about and bring up. And again, when you go to the question I had earlier is like, when you're telling your story, are you taking away from someone else's story? Should that be something that you care about? These are the questions that I have. Personally, I kind of think so. I don't know. It's weird. We'll keep talking about it. And the comments on this video, even though they're like from the time that this video was released, are all praising her as if she just served them this piping hot tea that they've been waiting for all of this time, and that she got like super vulnerable and like spilled everything. But it's still surface level in terms of this tell-all genre, which again is not inherently a problem. You shouldn't have to divulge more than you want to or make anything up to make it more interesting or anything like that. But it's being received as if it's some deep insight. So the first bomb that she drops in this video is that it's not normal to put yourself out there as a child. I wonder if she goes into more detail.
You know, being a kid and like going into like a room with a bunch of judgmental adults in very like strict business attire, it's not normal for kids to put themselves out there like that. I do think that Disney Channel in general, with the way that they've decorated their offices and stuff, like I definitely think they've created a culture of sort of like inclusion of the children that come into the, you know, the place.
What does that even mean? I don't know what one has to do with the other. And again, this is something that we know not everyone experiences. As the video goes on, she stops spilling tea for a little bit just to kind of rant about how much she wants to work for Disney again.
Like I remember in times that I wasn't necessarily like top priority or my stuff was in reruns and stuff like that, and I would come and visit to keep my relationships up with the Disney executives, which I do tend to do, and I do try to keep in touch with them. I'm ready to work for them again, but it has to be sort of on my terms. Okay guys, like where can you fit me in? Like where can I become the part of the family again? And so in my mind I have this like sick fantasy of like they're just gonna open the doors and they're gonna be like, yeah, you can just have any role you want. Because I've seen them work really well with people like Raven. I've seen them, you know, Disney in general try to, you know, redo the brand of the Hilary Duff show. And I've always sort of been the company man. I've always kind of been ready to work with them, ready to promote anything for them. I hope that in time that gets rewarded, but if it doesn't, I'm not gonna like have any ill will towards Disney. My mom, who was like, let's say yes to everything, let's make them happy, let's work well with them. And you know what? It totally worked. Like I was in a lot of things that people know now to this day. But I do, however, think that there is value in saying no. Saying no is important because it tells people that you know your worth. I love Disney. I go to Disneyland, I go to Disney World, I love it. I believe in the magic 120 million %. I'm just letting you know that this is my experience. I had an overwhelmingly positive experience working for Disney Channel.
And as you watch the whole video, you see that this isn't really about spilling tea on her past experiences with Disney. It's more about her gripes with not getting work from them recently, after like always being a yes man to them for, you know, the time she was a kid and how she's kept up appearances with them. She sees the opportunities that other former child stars get with the network, wonders where she can fit into all of this stuff. You can watch the whole video. I have videos that I'm clipping from, those are linked below. But that's the fairest conclusion that I was able to draw. And this isn't even really diminishing Christy's experiences because she didn't talk about them in this video. She didn't. I was just left wondering what the point was. Well, there is a point in this video where she tries to talk about the amount of makeup that she was made to wear on set. But instead of like opening up a discussion about the adultification of children, child actors specifically, or like the over-sexualization of women and girls in the industry, her takeaway is something different.
I did wear quite a lot of makeup. I will, looking back, they really caked that makeup on my young little face. I'm kind of confused as to why that was even permitted, but I guess that was just the polished look that they wanted to have for young girls to admire. I mean, maybe it was more of like just that, like, I didn't feel like a Barbie doll, but like, I do think there was quite a lot of makeup put on my face. I never really thought about that. But I had fun, and you know what? It taught me how to do my makeup forevermore.
And if that's her experience, that's fine. Maybe at this point in her journey, when this came out a few years ago now at this point, that's how she felt. Maybe there wasn't anything deeper to that. Maybe she genuinely didn't feel anything about it. This is not tea. This is not even like an interesting anecdote. Without contextualizing it further or trying to draw some sort of conclusion or to say something about it. Oh, wait. Apparently, she's gonna talk on-set feuds, so let's see what she has to say about that.
There's also kind of like set politics. Ooh. Here's some tea for you guys. Every set has certain people that don't get along. On my set, from time to time, it was like me and Shia. But I think there was other people that didn't gel well as well.
Is that it? So you're telling me 2 coworkers might not get along, especially when they're children. Oh, I never would have guessed. Like, for real? Girl, what?
I didn't feel at times that some of our like physical gags were thought out or budgeted enough with safety in mind. But then all I had to do was just tell them, look guys, I don't want to do this. And then they never wrote those gags for me anymore. And that's fine, because my character was like a teenage girl anyway. She found comedy in ways that didn't have to do with like physical humor. And Shia was more than willing to clown it up for everybody on the set. So I just kind of let him have that and take the bullet when it came to doing like the craziness.
I would be interested to know what Shia felt about the stunts. I don't know if he would be honest with me though. Maybe he would just plagiarize a response to that question. Yeah, that's another thing where she's just scratching the surface and you want her to make some sort of deeper point, and it just doesn't really happen.
I do love Disney. I probably will always love them. I really have sort of a deep love of the executives there. I know that they're trying their best to create good programming for the kids.
And I mean, she has a point there. Disney is definitely not on the level of Nickelodeon when it comes to like innuendos and inappropriate stuff in kids content. But anyway, like I said, the video is strange. It's very pro-Disney while still trying to capitalize on this tell-all anti-Disney, I guess, genre. Experiences are nuanced. That's fair. I feel like a broken record saying that. But if you've ever seen videos where she's addressing haters and stuff like that, you know kind of why I'm having this weird stuff that I'm saying, or why I'm saying this in a weird way. But the question that I have, the central question, or one of the central questions for this video remains, what is the line between authentically sharing your own experiences that just so happen to be more positive, and what is the line between that and then silencing people who have had worse experiences than you? Unintentionally, maybe. What's the line there? But the weirdness doesn't stop there. In between genuine insights into Christy's life, she does have a lot of videos that like are more genuine and are helpful for people. Like her sobriety, financial issues, her eating disorder. She has genuine videos in there. But in between, there's like weird self-inserts and name dropping And they make great clickbait titles, but again, the content is not really living up to those expectations or really say anything at all. The most popular example is her video about her relationship with Shia LaBeouf.
Everybody always asks me this question, if we're still in touch, if we're still friends. To be honest, I don't even really know if we were ever really friends. This sort of like very good on-screen chemistry. People assumed that we were in real life brother and sister. And that in real life, I had an influence over what this guy did. Watch Honey Boy, and it's like he's a completely traumatized young man at the same time that I'm working with him. I'm honored that people would think that I would still be in touch with him, because it means that we really did a good job of making you guys think that we were real life brother and sister.
I don't know if we have to go that far. I think it's just kind of expect two people who work closely together to have some kind of relationship. And you guys never had one, which is interesting. It seems like there's more of the story there, and you kind of just want her to say something to make it more interesting, because there is something here that she's not saying.
If I had known anything about him, I could have been a little bit more patient. I don't know, but I was dealing with my own thing. I was moving cross country for the opportunity. I was kind of sad about a breakup or something when I was 16, and I was dealing with my own drama. You know, we're kid stuff. It just kind of happened that way. I guess because I had a theater background, I took my job very seriously. You know, getting into character, remembering my lines, had a great time building this character. But over time, it became a job, and you know, you're tired from doing other things, trying to have a social life. I think he was dealing with so much more. I mean, honestly, when I look back, I just feel stupid. I know I'm not stupid because I care. And I think I did care even then. And I think that's why we had a little bit of animosity. I always wanted him to really appreciate what I gave to him. And something that actually really hurt my feelings was when he won his Emmy Award and he was on the podium. I was sitting there with the rest of our team, and he thanked like everybody at the table, but he didn't thank me. But I was hurt at the time because I felt like since day one, it was him and me. It was like our show. But because it was so life or death for him, it was his show. And I was just like around because I was a girl.
Christy, it sounds like you guys were never close to begin with, and you never cared to get close. You didn't know what was going on in his life or had the empathy to make his attitude and actions not about yourself. And I am absolutely not giving Shia LaBeouf the benefit of the doubt. I'm sure Christy had her reasons for not liking him. And as kids, it's hard for us to have that kind of empathy where we can be like, oh, this person's being mean to me because they have something going on. And it's not actually about me. And maybe I need to treat them with kindness instead of just being like another negative force in their life. Kids, teenagers, we don't really have that. I'm not saying we, like I'm still a kid, but I'm saying we as people, as kids and teenagers, don't have that. But like, maybe all of that is why you weren't mentioned. Like, would you have mentioned him if the roles were reversed? It just seems like a weird, self-centered expectation. And she also hints that it's because she was a girl, and that could be the case. I'm not a misogyny denier at all. But I would have liked her to spill something about that. Expand upon that. Why do you think that it was misogyny? And not in a way where, like, you need to explain it to me because I don't get it. I just want to know, like, what other things were happening that also led you to draw that conclusion. Spill the tea. Actually spill the tea, girl. So with Christy, her content just confuses and confounds me. It's either that she doesn't really have that bad of experiences, so she's like emphasizing the ones that she has had for like the clickbait of it all or whatever, or she has experiences that she hasn't even shared because she has a weird sense of still wanting to protect people that wronged her. And I guess this video on Shia LaBeouf probably came out before the FKA Twigs stuff. Even before that, it's like, Shia LaBeouf, why are you trying to pull as many positives as you can from your experiences with him? He's not like some likable, harmless guy. Was he in like 2019, 2020? I don't think so. Maybe I'm just misremembering and my view of the past is tainted by what we know about him now. Maybe you could also argue that she wanted to keep that doorway open so that if the small chance that he did want to do a reunion or some sort of thing with Even Stevens, that she would still have that opportunity there. But I don't want to assume that that was her only motivation. I think she genuinely is looking back at the relationship and about the things that she learned from that. I think the things that I was saying about, you know, when you're a kid, you don't really see things from other people's perspective. That's kind of what she's talking about in this video. But again, just go further into that. Talk about that more. But she also does talk about fond memories that she has with him and also shouts his mom out. She wishes him the best. It's a nice overall video. So like I said before, a lot of her videos from this era have been memed into oblivion. She actually chose to make a video addressing her haters, which I've kind of referenced here and there. I am not gonna play clips from that because I watched it once and I did not want to watch it again to edit it. So I'm gonna link that in like the if you want to see more section below. I'll have my videos that I've used clips of, and then I'll have, you know, if you want more info, videos down below. But one thing that I did want to talk about in the haters video is that she says that people were accusing her of inserting herself into 9/11. And this is where I want to defend Christy a little bit. And this is where why I think in my video, I don't want to just meme on her and make fun of her for being cringe and all this stuff. Because like the 9/11 video, I watched it and I was like, I wonder if this is going to be like a self-insert like all of her other stuff. But no, she was like literally at a performing arts high school in Manhattan. Her family's in Connecticut. She takes the bus there every day to go to school, or the train or whatever, sorry. And she like can't contact her parents because, you know, that wasn't really that easy to do in 2001. Like she had a genuinely scary experience on 9/11. Unlike people from freaking Utah talking about, oh, where were you when you found out that 9/11 happened? Like, that's become a joke at this point in American culture. But, like, she was there, bro. Like, I just thought that was unfair criticism towards her. And when you do unfair things like that, you kind of undermine some of the genuine criticisms that I think are fair to be levied against her. So, in this video, addressing the haters, she's like, clearly you guys didn't watch the video, blah, blah, blah. And I agree in this instance. So I watched some other videos that people mean on. I actually watched the videos, Christy, so that I could give my complete commentary on them. She has, like I said, a ton of like name droppy videos. What do I think about Britney Spears and Raven-Symoné and Donald Trump and also Bill Clinton for some reason, and Macaulay Culkin and Ashley Tisdale. And even though she hasn't been in a public feud herself, as far as I know, what does she think about people who were in public feuds growing up? That's a video topic. And also she made a video about the Russ situation. That one I didn't watch, actually. I forgot to before like making the script and filming this because I really want to know how she managed to find a connection to the Russ stuff. So I'll be interested in that to see, again, if it's a self-insert or if it's legitimate, like a legitimate story. She has both of them, but then she tries to paint them all as being these legitimate stories. It's like, no, some of these, like, I have a vape in my hand. Whoops. Some of these are like, you know, there's one about Katy Perry getting her record deal. Basically, Christy was on, I think it's called like a development contract or something like that with this record company, and she's working with this group called The Matrix that's like apparently notorious for making these pop hits, and Katy Perry at the time is their demo artist. It's the person who sings on the track that the producers are making, and then you send it out to artists that you want to take the song. I really like videos about the music industry and production. I'm not an expert by any means, but if you want to know more about demo artists and kind of how that works, the New York Times has a episode of this series that they used to do. I wish they still did it, kind of about how these really popular songs, how they were made. And they did one about The Middle by Zed. They have the demo artist in it, they interview her. And that's kind of where I learned about that whole concept even. Anyway, so here's her story about that.
They would produce these singles as demos, I guess, that they hoped would hit. They said to me, these are the songs that we already have that we're willing to work with you on. And one of them was a track with Katy Perry as the demo singer. I go to dinner with my friend Jody, who's a songwriter. I was like, Katy, I just want to say hello. And I want to tell you that I think you're so awesome. And I just love your voice so much. Now, keep in mind, she didn't have a deal. She was like bouncing around from place to place. And from what I was told, she was really, really looking for a deal. But I didn't care about that because, I didn't see it as a competitive thing. I just appreciated her voice so much. So I told her, hey, I have a development deal with Jason Blum. I know that you might have like known him or something like that, right? I was given this song by The Matrix and I put my voice on it, and I'm just really, really excited. Well, a couple months later, not even a month really, I was told that I didn't have a deal and that Katy Perry did. I don't know if she was just using her sense to say to herself, wow, Jason is in the market for this kind of voice. Or maybe she had a conversation that was already starting with him. Does it matter? Not really. There are absolutely no ill feelings to this girl at all. I love her voice, as I said, and ultimately I'm really, really happy that I am not a recording artist. This is a person, Katy Perry, who has dedicated her life to her craft. She absolutely deserved that record contract more than I did. I am so happy about the music that she put out. I think that, you know, now she's a mom and like she's done so much good for so many different people. Ultimately, it is kind of funny the way that life works out.
Like I said, I am not in the music industry. I'm not an expert. I have a peripheral interest in these things that I wish I knew more about, honestly. But I could be the dumb one. But Katy Perry was the demo artist on the track, right? So she already recorded this song with her voice. Why is it weird to assume that her recording that demo wasn't the reason they picked her? In the example that I mentioned earlier about the middle, what if they couldn't find an artist that matched the demo artist? That demo artist, I don't think she's interested in becoming a singer. Katy Perry, I think, was a demo artist as a step into a career as a full-blown artist. So I don't think it's far-fetched to be like, oh, nobody really compared to Katy, so we'll just give her this song and we'll give her a deal with this song since we liked how she did it on the demo so much. So I don't know why Christy needed to take it personally. Maybe at the time, like, yeah, I understand. But then to retell this story and then to be like, well, I don't know, maybe she did, maybe she didn't, I don't know. She's a pretty good singer though. I'm glad I didn't get a record deal. Like, it's just kind of weird. And then that whole, like, her being like, I'm calling you out, but not really, I really love you, trend continues with Anne Hathaway as well.
Here's why I don't have Anne Hathaway's career. Sometimes people are like, Christy Romano, Anne Hathaway. They're the same person. I can assure you that we are not. But we did start in New York together. She's a pretty cool chick. She went to Vassar, I went to Barnard. We're probably pretty aligned when it comes to the way we see the world, I think. I don't know. We definitely have a very similar smile. We're the same height, big brown eyes. Oh yeah, we sing. And that reminds me of an amazing Anne Hathaway story.
What? Anyway, let's just, okay, go on to the audition or whatever. Keep going.
In the waiting room, you kind of can't help but hear people's auditions, right? So, me, some other girls, Anne Hathaway, sitting next to each other, and she has a very distinctive look, right? Because she looks like me. So I knew that it was her, and I remember that it was her, because I was like, this girl looks just like me. Obviously they're looking for a particular type of person. I did my best performance ever, my best audition in that room. And so I come out, now again, I'm only 14, so nobody knows Anne Hathaway yet. And she's sitting there, and I felt so incredibly bad. Because she was sitting there, and I just came out and had the world's best audition. And then I end up getting the part, right? So that was awkward.
Bruh. One thing that Christy forgets to mention is that she also doesn't know who Anne Hathaway is at this point. Because she's not famous yet, she's a child. So like, why are you paying so much attention to this girl that you don't know? And obviously, like, it's probably a storytelling device, like, she's not thinking this at the time as a child, but it's just kind of annoying, and the way that she frames it as being awkward, I think is disingenuous. So that's kind of awkward.
One day you can be up, another day you can be down, and then you can be up again. You just never know. Cut to California. I am doing a show, Even Stevens, and I am rehearsing for a new movie called Princess Diaries. It is like almost time for me to leave to go get ready for the audition, and I get called in by the producers and they say, Christy, we don't have time for you to go to the audition today. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance. And I wanted to do this audition so badly. I don't know why, but I just knew it could be a big deal for me. I didn't get that audition. I didn't get to go because we had to film overtime or something like that. And so sadly, I never got my shot at that. Now, I do think that it would have made my career if I would have got it. That isn't to say that she wasn't the right person for the role. She's amazing. She was so cute in it, and I mean, so charming. But I didn't get a shot.
She's literally implying that she could have Anne Hathaway's career. I don't know how you can come to any other conclusion that's more charitable to her. She beat her once at an audition and believes that she could do it again. And that if she got the opportunity to for Princess Diaries, that she would now have Anne Hathaway's career and be in Nolan movies and all this stuff. Like why else would you tell the story if that's not your point? She mentions throughout the video about how people think they look alike and stuff like that. We already saw that. So then her takeaway is that people pit women against each other when they look similar. Like, that's the moral of this story.
People want to pit women against each other because they look similar, and that's kind of crazy. You know, people actually come down on Anne Hathaway. I've heard like gossip about, oh, she's not nice, she's this, she's that. You hear that about all different kinds of levels of actresses. I've had people probably say that about me. Oh, she's difficult, maybe. That's the word that they use, by the way, in the industry when a female is not behaving properly.
And this definitely is a thing in the industry, especially in like the whole acting world, because your image and the type that you can be casted in is super important. But instead of being introspective about how she is perpetuating the very thing she's saying the industry is perpetuating, she's pitting women against each other when she's telling these stories. In my personal opinion, that's what I believe. Again, I don't know how you can draw a different conclusion that is more charitable to her in these two instances, the Katy Perry video and the Anne Hathaway video specifically, because those are the ones that I can speak to. And actually, I did watch her Britney video, and it wasn't like this. And she doesn't even have like a deeper point, again, which is why she has to pivot it to another thing that women experience in the industry, which is that they'll be accused of being difficult to work with. Or, yeah, like people will talk badly about women in the industry for like innocuous things. She's not able to expand on the point of pitting women against each other because she doesn't have anything beyond a surface level interpretation to divulge about the situation. I feel really petty ripping into her content like this, but I think it establishes a pattern that we'll see again later. And like I said, there were a lot of genuine videos as well. And I don't want to comment on how people choose to tell their stories necessarily. And I think a lot of these topics are important to talk about. And like, just because you didn't talk about it good enough, like that's not my point here. The entirety of her content is not harmful in and of itself. So far, the harm that we've seen in her videos so far in this analysis is non-consequential because it toes that line that I've been mentioning about just telling your story versus, okay, but by you telling your story, is there an unintended effect that happens? She's not obligated to expand upon anything that she doesn't want to, especially if it wouldn't be genuine for her to. Towards the end of February 2022, Christy uploads a final vlog, and this video talked about putting the walk and talk videos to a close. Vulnerable does not always have child stars on, but that's definitely a bulk of the content, even to this day. And the concept was inspired by that feeling of catharsis that Christy had through these walk and talk videos, unpacking her past, and the empowerment that comes from being able to tell your own story, which is another theme of this video. When we're able to create our own platform, we often like to share it with other people to provide that same sense of empowerment. And Vulnerable is exactly what it sounds like if you haven't listened to it. Christy basically interviews somebody about their experiences, allowing them to share things that they might not have shared before. Alyson Stoner, one of the people that we've been talking about this entire time, was an early guest on the podcast. The effect of the industry on children is something that Alyson had been researching for a while, and then that culminated in the open letter for People magazine. Here, they're going to talk about how that allowed them to connect.
And we've been communicating a lot lately. I would like more, but you are very busy.
Whoa. You act like we've been trying. You didn't reach out to me.
You
In
never
my
get
mental
back,
mind.
you liar.
No. The reason I say this is because there was a wonderful email exchange happening, which I'll let you kind of expand on.
So I had written an op-ed at some point last year, maybe it was a few years ago at this point. Time is irrelevant. And why are there no resources for parents?
Why is this an issue?
Why does it even happen in the first place? I started gathering a couple different people, and at some point we were in touch suddenly.
After your op-ed, I was very affected by it. I had also done an op-ed for Teen Vogue, and I kind of stumbled onto sort of not exposing, but like sharing my sort of side of things. And I've had 2 daughters, you know, and
you become passionate about the subject.
Oh
so
man,
you kind of hit on it.
instantly.
The concept of, well, are you going to put your kids in the business? It's like, hell no.
In the interview, you can see how much time Alyson has invested into this. You can see how much they really care about the issue. And just with their knowledge, their extensive knowledge on things, you can tell that it is a passion project. They make comments about intersectionality, how certain child stars are going to have it worse, not everybody has the same access. Christy is, of course, newer to this work, but her passion is also shining through. her husband, who's very involved with Podco. I can't remember which one is a CEO and which one is like, they both have top titles at Podco. But he's also on this episode, and I actually did enjoy his contributions that he made. He doesn't necessarily give me any weird vibes. But Christy does talk about how it's possible that through this type of work, people will be getting ostracized from the industry, even though she doesn't understand why that would happen, because it's like, why wouldn't she want to protect kids? So again, you see that she doesn't understand the complexities of the issue in the same way that Alyson does. She's coming from like more of an emotional place that obviously you would come from, but I think Alyson has spent time with it for longer, that they're able to kind of work through those things and come up with solutions.
I would fight for you. I will fight for you. I feel like our paths are only at the beginning, and I say that with like an aspiration to be more involved, because there is change that needs to happen. Now, the problem is this, and people aren't going to like this. You know, we're going to be ostracized silently.
And this is where capitalism rears its ugly head. Workers' rights aren't really something that capitalism is concerned about. They're very anti-union. And meanwhile, unions are responsible for most, if not all, of labor laws, including child labor laws that we have in this country. Capitalism is antithetical to human rights. Anyway, Alyson discusses their approach to the issue, which is, in essence, how they're making this more palatable to capitalists and people in the industry.
My particular approach is, we're not here to point fingers. We're not here to name, blame, or shame anyone, because that's just going to close people off. So
that's how I feel when people try to strong arm me and be like, Disney's a bad place. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah,
whoa.
I'm
I was
like,
we're not going to just say that. That's not necessary.
Yeah, and I don't think up until this point I've ever said Disney is 100% bad. That is not my honest truth, and that's not the full story.
So Alyson is talking about these tangible steps for change. For example, like intimacy coaches have become normalized on sets, which is something that they talk about in this podcast. Alyson suggests that child experts who are able to assist the child in dealing with the emotional toll that acting can take on a small human, having trouble distinguishing between pretend and real life. There are entire modules and procedures and plans that Alyson is creating to improve these conditions on set.
So I'm in the process of developing, alongside a team of health experts and actors, mental health toolkits for artists. That's to help them have resources before auditions, after auditions, how to enroll as a character, de-roll to make sure there aren't blurred lines between identities, even things down to rejection, comparison, stage fright, just having practical tools that help them navigate the day in, day out. As we formulate the modules, we have to do multiple things. We have to educate and inform. We have to have it be practical tools that are accessible, but we also have to, from an industry standpoint, convince productions, networks, and whatnot to see the value of it, probably by running numbers. Let's be real. I basically want to be the person who's like, no matter what you say to me right now, we have already thought that through and we have a plan for it.
I love that.
Because then at that point, if they're like, but it's going to cost us, and we're like, nope, we have that chart for you.
When Alyson's podcast, Dear Hollywood, finally released this August of this year, 2023, you may have assumed to see some sort of involvement with Christy's podcast production company, Podco, especially because in February of this year, Christy and her husband officially launched Podco with a slate of programming fitting into that reunion/rewatch podcast genre that became popularized with Office Ladies and kind of took off with the pandemic and stuff like that. So their initial slate of podcasts at the top of the year was a Ned's Declassified rewatch podcast, which I'm wondering who asked for, and Wizards of Waverly Place also has their own version of this podcast. Harper and the dad, I am forgetting both of their names right now. Is it Jennifer Stone? Oh my god, if it's Jennifer Stone, that would be kind of wild that I remember that. And then, is it David DeLuise or Don DeLuise? Those are two people that are people, right? I just don't remember which one is him. Anyway, those two from Wizards of Waverly Place have a podcast, and I haven't heard any weird things about it. I think Selena Gomez has called into it, actually, and I think they're doing fine, and people enjoy it. I haven't heard anything bad or cringe from there. You definitely see the cringe clips from Ned's, that's for sure. Another name that kept coming up when I was researching Podco is the Brotherly Love podcast, and actually, I first heard of this podcast when I was watching the Do We Know Them episode, where they're kind of getting into the Christy Carlson Romano lore. And Lily on that podcast in the edit is talking about how a lot of news stories have come from there because of the things that the brothers have shared on that podcast. And I'm like, how have I literally never heard about this before? Not through any of the headlines that have come from this or anything. That's really weird. And then when I was on the Podco website, I'm like, I don't even see Brotherly Love on here. And so apparently the Brotherly Love podcast is the Lawrence brothers, which are before my time. I think... I could be wrong because I did not research this before I started filming. One of them was like the My Date with the President's Daughter guy. I don't know if that's true. And maybe one of them was in Boy Meets World. I didn't watch Boy Meets World. That was kind of before my time. Yeah, I don't remember. But it's Joey, Matt, and Andy. Is it? Anthony. I think it's Anthony. Hold on. I have my computer right in front of me, so... Oh, I think it is Andy. Andrew. Anyway, so I'm doing some digging, figuring out about this podcast and trying to figure out what's happening. So I go to the Brotherly Love podcast YouTube channel and start looking for any clues that I can find. Well, they make it really easy because in their thumbnails, you can see their microphones in all of them. And in the beginning, they had microphones that had like a little cap. I don't know what that's called. The little thing that says like channel 4 or whatever on it. It would have the Podco logo on them, and you can see that in all the thumbnails up until a certain point. And I'm like, that's interesting. So I click on the one that doesn't have the Podco logo in the thumbnail, or on the mics in the thumbnail. And this is how that podcast opens.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Wow.
Welcome back to the
Brotherly Love Pod.
No, wait.
The new and improved.
Let's start at the beginning and
Start at
actually
the beginning.
catch people up
Oh, they're going to love this.
to where we are
People
right
now all across America and the world are
The
clicking
last,
off their TVs.
what,
and,
6 weeks?
Yeah.
Have been such an incredible journey for us when
It
it comes
has.
to this podcast.
Yeah, it has.
I mean, the ups, the downs, we almost lost it. Let's
The
be
ins,
real with
the
you
outs.
guys.
Right.
You know how they say there's always like a silver lining to things?
Yeah.
I think there truly was to this. I think there was a master plan when
Yes,
it comes to this,
I believe
this
in that.
little podcast.
I believe in the divine plan.
Absolutely, me
All right,
too.
yep.
And I think like out of this kind of brush fire, all this new birth has occurred.
So all this language is alluding to a bad contract that they were thankfully able to get out of. And I tried finding more evidence for this. There were Reddit comments mentioning that they talked about it with Bert Kreischer a little bit in more detail, where they explicitly said bad contract, but I literally couldn't find it. And the content that Bert Kreischer and the Brotherly Love podcast dudes have made is like multiple hours long, and I am so sorry. I could not listen to it. So I'm like looking through the transcript and command effing and like trying to find any information that I could, and I couldn't. So I don't even know if they do confirm it with Bert Kreischer, but there you go. But I think we can come to the conclusion that something about the deal was not good. But we kind of sidetracked. I was talking about Dear Hollywood because, like I said, you would have expected Podco to have a hand in Dear Hollywood because Christy and Alyson were like, looked like they had a close working relationship going on. Alyson was on the podcast again later where they were still kind of talking about that. So the night before I discovered the Brotherly Love stuff, I was watching Alyson Stoner's Dear Hollywood just all the way through because the first season is finished. When I was watching that, I hear this.
Okay, I have to tell you this because it illustrates the purpose of this podcast in real time. So, I actually wrote and recorded Dear Hollywood over a year ago. I was collaborating with a production company who was truly wonderful at first, but then they switched their legal team, and the new person decided on the recording of the final episode that in order to move forward, I needed to sign a contract stating I would not get paid a cent for my work up front, though their team would. Further, on the back end, their company would get to make around $100,000 from ad revenue before I would see a single cent. Then they said that
they would give me $1,000 per episode, even though the associate producer would be making more than that. The associate producer.
Given this was the podcast based on my literal life story of being taken advantage of as an artist, and that I spent a year writing every episode myself, tapping my personal network for guests, recording it on my own computer and equipment at home that I purchased and trained myself to use. And really, I was only relying on them to help distribute it to a larger audience. I chose to walk away from the deal. Unfortunately, I'm not permitted to share the footage or those interviews, but I do have my dignity and all of the intellectual property in my mind, heart, and hard drive.
And since this was before I had the brotherly love info, I was just like, oh, wow, I wonder what companies screw over people all the time. That's kind of interesting. Then I thought about Alyson mentioning that they use their own personal network of connections in the industry for interviews, and I wondered if Christy sniped them. That did come across my mind. But I'm still at the point in my research where this video was going to go an entirely different route, and I was kind of giving Christy the benefit of the doubt. So I go to bed at some point, and then the next day is when I discover the brotherly love microphone thing, that they're not a part of Podco anymore because something went sour there. And then I immediately start diving into the Alyson and Christy relationship. I forgot how closely they seem to be working together. And then rewatching the vulnerable episodes, that relationship was solidified in my mind. So if Podco wasn't the company that Alyson was talking about, wouldn't you expect to see some sort of acknowledgement of the series on Christy's end? I mean, they do still follow each other on Instagram, but if you look at Alyson's content made for Instagram promoting the podcast, Christy is not in the comments, she's not in the likes. If Christy wasn't involved, wouldn't you expect to see a follow-up with Alyson now that it has been released to promote it? Now, I can't say for sure that Christy has never made a story post or never interacted with a single post from Alyson Stoner since their alleged fallout, that I'm the one that's alleging basically, because I don't have time to, I have not been following things that closely this whole time. And also I didn't expect there to be beef until I started digging into things. But it is just shocking to me that there isn't something more notable from Christy's end when it comes to promoting Dear Hollywood. Not even a comment on one of the reels being like, oh, I'm so happy that this is finally released or anything. So that information is how I informed the opinion that I did. Maybe you think I'm exaggerating, but let's keep going. It's finally time to get into what this video was originally supposed to be about. Enter our final player, Alexa Nikolas. Alexa Nikolas played Nicole on Zoe 101. Only for one season though. We didn't know why when the show was running when we were children, but in the past couple of years, Alexa has found her voice, and now we know that she was ruthlessly bullied on the set, and the adults in power did nothing to stop it. In fact, they actively encouraged it and were kind of bullies themselves. And Alexa now does a ton of advocacy work, Created to Eat Predators, where her aim is to empower survivors and expose both the predators themselves and these institutions that are responsible for keeping them in power. As we heard earlier in this video, it wasn't until Jeanette McCurdy's book came out that the spotlight finally fully shifted into this millennial child star trauma. And now it's trending, which is a blessing and a curse. On one hand, the new eyes on the movement allowed Alexa's protest to gain more coverage. And now she's running a YouTube channel where she goes live with Eat Predators Daily and covers a lot of topics from the entertainment industry that are happening in the news cycle. And in my personal opinion, Alexa's content very strongly contrasts Christy's. It doesn't feel like a self-insert. Current events are brought up and they do have clickbaity titles because that's the name of the game, but that does not seem to be the main goal for Alexa beyond making sure that she can pay or have the money to have protests happen, things like that. So yeah, Alexa is not walking in a forest talking about her personal experiences and thoughts and opinions on Diddy because she doesn't have them. And instead, she is going to talk about the survivors' stories and maybe talk about her own insight into things that she knows about the music industry and things like that. And when she does have personal involvement in a story, like with the Jonah Hill stuff, I don't know if you saw that when it happened. She was on H3 talking about that, so you might have seen that. She said that her goal in sharing these things is more about solidarity with the victims coming forward, not as a way to capitalize or take the spotlight away from them or anything like that. Although, you could, I guess, argue that that is something that might happen. But anyway, both creators, Alexa and Christy, hold space for people to speak out about their experiences. But effectiveness in that goal also matters. It's not just about your intent, And like Alexa says, are you still an advocate off camera?
And listen, is that necessarily bad of her? No, it's not. And it's all about context and what she stands for when she's not making money. When she's not making money, who is she? How is she showing up in the world? Does she care when it's not trending? No. I'm sad to say, in my own personal opinion today, she sadly proved to me she preferred to make money off of an alleged predator.
Through her protests of Nickelodeon, Christy found her work and became interested in having her on the Vulnerable podcast, which she was a guest on earlier this year. And then Corey Feldman was a guest as well later, after Alexa was. Because of Alexa's advocacy work, a friend of an alleged victim of Corey Feldman reached out on Instagram to talk about how this friend reached out to Christy privately on Instagram as well, talking about like the allegations against Corey and how like, girl, are you sure you want to platform this guy? Things like that. Just coming at her in a very genuine way. And she could see that Christy read the message, but then she never responded to it. So she contacted Alexa hoping to get some help in that situation. So in 2 episodes of Eat Predators Daily that I'm going to be clipping from, they have a ton more information about that, and like all the screenshots and everything. And also in the Do We Know Them episode, which I'm also linking as like extra info, they go into more detail about that as well. Now, Corey Feldman is a whole video in itself, so I'm not going to go into excruciating detail. This video is already way too long, but critics have accused Corey of exploiting his dead friend Corey Haim's experiences of being sexually abused in the industry. He made a documentary that the release of that was kind of weird, and he also claims the abuser was Charlie Sheen, even though Haim's living family, his mom, I think his sister too, say that it wasn't that guy and it was actually some other guy that is, or was, I should say, because this man's now dead. He died in 2018. But that this man that died in 2018 was the actual abuser, and Corey Feldman was friends with him for forever. He also has been outspoken about how great a guy Hugh Hefner was, publicly kind of refuting the stories of people who have come out against him, and also put a pin in that. And his music is terrible. And no, I'm never going to call into question the legitimacy of someone's story if I don't have solid proof, but it's hard to tell how much of Feldman's work in this is genuine versus a grift versus are you trying to atone for something? And the conversation surrounding him has begun to shift since he started receiving his own allegations. In 2020 is when they came back, but these allegations had been made prior as well. But he's definitely been criticized for how he's handled Corey Haim's story, for sure. Not in a way that like everyone in the mainstream has criticized him for that, but there has been like that is like a take that people have had for a while. However, it's kind of difficult to find information about all this stuff. If you're just doing a Google search on Corey Feldman's name, you kind of have to play around with the words when you find what you're looking for. And in order to research for this video, I had to find these things. So if you type in Corey Feldman accusations, you won't get the accusations about him. You'll see articles about him accusing people in Hollywood and like his documentary and things like that. You have to look up Corey Feldman SAG-AFTRA in order to start getting these articles about the accusations towards him. But you won't still in those articles about the accusations toward him, you don't get a detailed account. It's not like this is a tell-all where this person is sharing with a journalist their story and they're blasting it to the media and it's this whole campaign. That did not happen. And he also, like, he gets to tell his side of the story and like he gets to make his statement in these articles as well, where he's saying that like they tried accusing him previously and it didn't go through. The DA didn't press charges, but it's like, if you know anything about how cops handle sexual violence, that's not surprising to you, and that doesn't automatically mean that nothing happened. And this was a big news story in June and July of 2020. I mean, there was a lot more important stuff going on at the time, but if you're in this sphere, it's probably something that you saw, especially because Christy usually is like eyeing up guests for her show and things like that. But this was also in 2020 where she couldn't really do collabs anymore, so maybe it slipped through the cracks.
When I reached out to Christy, I thought the only other person who has ever reached out to her was the survivor's friend. Okay. So I thought, I was literally that naive. I thought the first time that Christy heard about these allegations was from the survivor's friend after she already had Corey on the podcast. So I was giving her the benefit of the doubt. So I kept thinking, wow, so the first time she hears about this, maybe she was so, I don't know, shocked by it that she just didn't know what to do with the information. I was just trying to think and give her the benefit of the doubt, but no. Because this morning I got to hear what really happened on this podcast. So
then towards the end of the episode, Corey starts going on a rant about Wikipedia.
But you're kind of like, wait, why is Corey so upset about the internet and upset about bots and what's going on here, right? Let's see where this goes.
He literally had, I've been under such brutal attacks. My Wikipedia page is all bullshit. All of it. Every second of it.
But he's starting with his height, and that Wikipedia has gotten his height wrong. So therefore, everything within Wikipedia is also false.
What I care about is the fact that, when you try to look up my film, it will lead you to a link of BS stories of gaslighting. Well, right, because then they start gaslighting. It causes PTSD and trauma. Do you know there is nothing more painful to a survivor of abuse than being called an abuser?
Oh, there it is.
He's lying here. There's a small section on Wikipedia. Compared to everything else that's on his Wikipedia, there's a small section about the allegations towards him. It mentions the initial allegations pre-2020 that were dropped by the DA, and it links to a People article that I wouldn't say is written in his favor, but it is written in that fair journalistic way where it's giving both sides of the story and it's saying these charges were dropped and blah, blah, blah. There are links to 4 articles detailing the SAG-AFTRA situation. It's basically like the local president in LA was not going to remove him from the board. The national president was like, hey, you probably should remove this guy from your board. Well, that's kind of negligent that you didn't do that. Even in these articles that are talking about this situation, they don't really describe the accusations. Like I said, it's not a tell-all. They're just saying, he's been accused of sexual harassment, abuse, assault. And they're written, again, like your typical journalistic news stories about something like this. Corey's side is properly represented. The links are below so you can see for yourself. His side is properly represented. And if you read at least one of those articles, you will see how he's exaggerating what these articles are doing. So Wikipedia does link from the Twitlonger, which is where the whole SAG-AFTRA thing started. Basically, one of his accusers from back before 2020, the initial accusations, it's a long thing. I'll have this linked as well. But she talks about all of her experiences and the things that she has witnessed, interviews of other people who have experienced these things. And then also she does talk about the criticism about how he handles the Corey Haim stuff, how he was friends with the person who probably is Corey Haim's actual abuser, with a bunch of links, and it's very credible. But also through Wikipedia was the only way for me to find this Twitlonger, to know what the accusations actually were, to have more detail, because these publications were not giving that side of the story. Like I said, there was no op-ed by somebody, there was no expose from the New York Times or something. There was none of that. There was no cancellation campaign. These women were trying to take legal action and have spoken out in ways that you can't really say that they were trying to get clout off of, because I don't know this woman's name. She has this Twitlonger, but a letter from Jackie, I guess. But it's not you know what I mean? It's not there's a bunch of hoopla and press over her specifically, or any of the victims in that matter. It's not like they've been trying to capitalize off of this. And these are not the top results you get when you Google his name, his movie, anything like that. Even Corey Feldman accusations, you don't see this stuff off of those first Google searches.
Wow, Christy. I really gave you the benefit of the doubt. No, you knew about it, didn't ask any questions, which honestly, you could be a better host. Honestly, in these interviews, I would have asked, what do you mean by that? And I would want to know more before I make money off of the clicks from this person's interview.
And again, I feel like I am giving her way too much of the benefit of the doubt, but we are all different, I suppose. a lot of people, not me, but a lot of people would hear from a friend or an acquaintance or somebody that they're like, oh yeah, these BS allegations about me, whatever. And they probably wouldn't ask any questions. They'd be like, oh, whatever. Wouldn't think to ask anything further. But when you've been through something yourself, or if you're a good enough ally and you've done your homework to realize that false accusations are super rare, and if people who do falsely accuse have been victims, just not by that person, so it's a complicated situation where abuse is still involved. So either you've experienced it yourself or you've familiarized yourself with this world, and you understand that, you know, you should probably be like, if somebody has accusations about them and they're just brushing them off as BS accusations, there might be something there a little bit. When you're claiming that your Wikipedia is full of lies because they got your height wrong and they happen to have your accusations that they don't even really like say one way or the other that you did something, like, it's not inflammatory at all. None of it is, except for the twit longer, I guess. It's just like, I think the lady doth protest too much, you know? And maybe if you're Christy, you don't want to confront this man face to face and ask these hard questions. Although I did have to dig a little bit to research this stuff. At the end of the day, it took me 10 minutes to find the twit longer, which isn't like just a cursory Google search. It took me a little bit, but it was something that I was able to find. And he gave you the roadmap to find it. He says, oh yeah, my Wikipedia page sucks. And so if you go to the Wikipedia page and start clicking through the links in that little section, that's tiny, may I remind you, then like he gave you the instructions to find out the information that you needed to do your own research. So if you claim to be this person that gives platforms to survivors, the bare minimum that you would do when you listen to the evidence, or is that you would listen to the evidence when it's handed to you directly in private, and also directly in the interview itself from the person themselves. Especially when the people who were approaching you privately were incredibly kind to you, giving you the benefit of the doubt. It's just hard for me to see a situation where someone who's an ally, whether it's in a sexual abuse situation or any sort of allyship situation, why you would blatantly ignore the people that you claim to be supporting, unless of course you're only marketing yourself as an ally. We all do make mistakes, and you can become an enabler of abuse just as easy as you can accidentally become an enabler of somebody's addiction. It can happen to people. You don't have to explicitly try to. So when people that you're claiming to stand up for call you in, it's not a call out. It's not to expose you or to destroy you. It's a call in to reflect, to apologize, and to do better. Then you kind of need to take that to heart if you want to earn your allyship. Because in my opinion, as somebody who has dealt with, you know, trying to understand what being an ally is and how I can be a better person and all this stuff, an ally is something that is given, like, it's a title that's kind of given to you, and it's something that you do have to earn.
I tweeted, "Hey, Christy Carlson Romano, remember when you left this all on red? I was a survivor on your show. Remember?" And that remember wasn't even just sarcastic. It was like, do you remember? Do you remember Eat Predators and do you remember the stuff? Like, do you remember me breaking down how predatory behavior they're able to do what they're doing through enablers? And here's Christy Carlson Romano, in my opinion, becoming an enabler. And I was just on your show, like, telling you how it works. So, like, don't have me do this emotional labor, be vulnerable on your vulnerable podcast, and then leave me hanging here. And I know that a lot of people out there want to not think of themselves as enablers because some of them are actually good people. I think some people, their intentions are maybe in the right place most of the time. And right here is a pure example of someone that might have good intentions in a lot of other places in their life, but right here faltered.
We can't with 100% certainty claim that Christy's entire platform is built on lies. I don't even believe that to be the case. It's just extremely frustrating that when you're asked to be held accountable as an ally, a lot of allies to marginalized groups will instead feel attacked. And then they accuse the marginalized people of bullying them, things like that. As far as we know, Christy hasn't experienced a lot of the things that people come on her show to talk about. So she is positioning herself as an ally to these people who have experienced these things. And being a survivor of sexual violence is not like a marginalized identity in the same way that being like black, brown, other person of color, or LGBTQ, or disabled, or anything, any marginalized identity. It's not in the same way, but it is like you either have or you haven't been, you know? And I mean, I've talked about on Twitter before how I believe a lot more people have experienced sexual violence that might not ever realize that they have experienced it, just because of how society is and how normalized it is, and that's a really sad thing. And that's why it's different than a typical marginalized versus ally relationship, because it's kind of complicated. But that's why, like, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. And also, you don't want to say, well, this person could have been assaulted, so do I want to call them an ally or do I want to call them a victim? If they're not calling themselves that, then we don't need to call themselves that, or we don't need to call them that. And I feel like it's easy to say that cancel culture is the reason that people are so paranoid at being called out, that it feels like every piece of constructive criticism is an attack. But I don't think that's fully true. I think we've always been sensitive to criticism as human beings, especially when we don't think we're doing anything wrong. We don't have any doubt in our mind that we made a bad decision. It's hard to be wrong. Think of children, if you have them or whatever, when a kid has to learn that, you know, sometimes they're in the wrong and they need to apologize. Like, that's a hard thing as a human being, just in general, to learn. I think if anything, cancel culture has given people an excuse to be more bold when it comes to not being able to admit how they're wrong. Because then they can just say, oh, people are attacking me, people want me canceled, they don't actually want to see, you know, growth or change or whatever. And that's also not to say that harassment and bullying, doxing, and death threats aren't happening in these scenarios, because I do believe that cancel culture has made it so that things escalate to that a lot more quickly, and also those things can drown out everything else, and then at that point the conversation has turned unproductive. One of the things that I took away from the Lindsay Ellis controversy, where she compared Raya the Last Dragon and Avatar the Last Airbender, is that it's nearly impossible to see constructive criticism when you're in that situation through everyone else inundating you with vitriol. Whether it's, you know, because they're upset and they're affected by it, or if it's bad faith actors who are kind of fueling the fire. And that's not even to tone police the people who are upset. It's more so saying that, like, there are people who will manipulate people's hurt feelings and weaponize that to the point where it's no longer about, you know, just letting Lindsay know that, hey, maybe this kind of seems like you're comparing all Asian stories and stuff and saying that it's not original at a time where Asians are experiencing a lot of hate crimes, and this is not really a good look, this is how it's perceived, maybe you want to correct yourself. And instead of that, which people were saying in the beginning, it's turning into this whole thing. And if I remember correctly, I think she was on a flight when all this was happening, so she even missed, like, that opportunity to see anything constructive, and then it just devolved into this whole thing. Yeah, I think from that situation, it helped me to realize that when you're in the position of being massively canceled, that, because one thing that I've said, and I know people who follow YouTube drama and stuff always say, is like, but they should just ignore the stupid stuff and address the actual concerns that people have. In that situation, they don't see the actual concerns at some point. And I think that's something that's important to keep in mind when we're trying to call someone in. I think it's also worth noting that child stars don't have a normal childhood, and famous people in general are very not normal. They live not normal lives. So a lot of their personality quirks and flaws can be explained by their weird upbringing. As Alyson Stoner talked about in their appearances, it's all up to the former child star to be able to recognize these things and take it upon themselves to change. And sometimes, especially if you're a former child star, you might not have the monetary resources to do so. Your parents might have stolen all your money or whatever else. And so that's kind of where it differs from, like, famous people, where, like, a Kanye West, it's like you can get mental health care. But for former child stars, it might be a little bit more difficult to unpack all of these things because they're not really even raised to see that any of it was a problem in the first place. Like, they don't know that they have any issues that are worth solving. And explanations of behavior are not excuses, but they are important to point out so that you can see the path to healing more clearly. If, for example, let's bring this down to a level that all of us normies can understand. If you have abandonment issues because your parent left you at a young age or something like that, and then later in your relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, you are a flighty one and you hurt people before you get hurt and stuff like that. Understanding why you act like that is not a free pass to continue acting like that. It is a way for you to recognize that you don't have to act like this. So that's why I think explanations for behavior are important.
And I let everyone know that I'm done, being what Hollywood groomed me to be. Which was silent, scared, a people pleaser, a pushover, and it's time for us to encourage one another to be better human beings. I tried privately, so did the survivor's friend, and so it's time to level up. And I'm trying to nudge a person that I know, Christy Carlson Romano, to do the right thing.
But instead of listening to the friend of the survivor and also a peer who's trying to call her in privately, Christy decides to punish Alexa for speaking out by removing her episode of the podcast after Alexa finally took to Twitter to let out her frustrations about the situation.
I didn't deserve to be punished. This happens all the time. When someone tries to stand up for the survivor, guess what? They get fired at the corporate job. And honestly, that was the power flex that I believe Christy Carlson Romano flexed. And probably because she learned it from the industry, since we grew up in the industry. And this is why it's important to be cycle breakers and not continue this cycle, because it's awful. And I don't even truly believe that's who she is inside. It's learned behavior. We weren't taught to take accountability of our actions.
Now, this is not the only time in the Corey Feldman episode where Christy fails survivors. Remember earlier when I said that Corey Feldman is known for defending Hugh Hefner. I think being known for it is a little bit of a stretch, but he's done it before. Like, this was not the first time that this has happened. Like, if you're not paying super close attention to Corey, you probably wouldn't know that. But it happens, again, in the interview directly to Christy's face, and she just goes along with it.
I love your impression of Hef.
I never saw those pictures. Well, that's unfortunate, Corey.
Or is it that she didn't sleep with Hef? That's why she didn't.
No.
That's not how he was?
No, not at all.
Okay, good.
No, that's totally not true.
Dispelling the rumors.
No, he wasn't like that at all.
Yeah, good.
It was more like...
I never thought of him like that. Now his son is kind of in charge of the...
I never thought of him like
anymore,
that. Right? Christy, didn't you have Holly on the Vulnerable podcast?
This is so disgusting to me. There's a stark difference between not wanting to get into an argument with the person that you're interviewing and also just buying into their bullshit completely and perpetuating it, which is what I believe is being done here. She didn't have to make those comments, but she chose to. She had Holly Madison on her show and decided to take Corey's word for it instead, and I think it's pitiful.
Are you listening to what Holly is saying here? She is on your platform, trusting you with some of her trauma here. And you are nodding along to this. But then fast forward with Corey Feldman, you're like, oh, I never thought he was like that anyways. And it's good to, get rid of those rumors. So you think what Holly was saying here was a rumor? I'm getting this performative feeling just because I'm starting to see this, and it's starting to really give me the, like I just don't like what I'm witnessing. You shouldn't act like this, and then when you have another guest on who happens to be an alleged predator, that you just switch off like that and then just say that you never thought Hugh Hefner was like that anyways. Why didn't you say that when you were talking to Holly?
It's so bad. Christy, if you're not performative, if this is all genuine, you need to do something. It's not a good look at all. And I don't just mean silently deleting the episode with Corey, which is what she ended up doing. You need to say something. Or you need to find a new grift. I'm sure the next trend will be happening really soon. If that's all this is for you, and you may feel that it's unfair to say that, but sweetie, your actions are solely responsible for how you're being perceived. And you need to take accountability for that. If your actions aren't showing how you truly feel inside, you don't feel they're an accurate representation for who you are, that means you made a mistake. That means you need to change something. I've experienced it. You watching have probably experienced it. We've all probably experienced this in one way or another. Maybe not as on much of a public platform as Christy, but also she's not getting the worst of it, of people who have been called out for stuff like this. Random Reddit users, so you can take it or leave it, have reported that they've been blocked by Christy on multiple different platforms. Like, let's say they'll comment to her on TikTok, they'll look at Instagram and they're blocked on there as well. They'll look on Twitter, they're blocked on there as well. In the Lindsay Ellis case that I mentioned earlier, everything happened so fast that there wasn't really that time to get the constructive part of it through to Lindsay. But Christy, this did not have to turn into a thing at all. In fact, I think I'm making this video kind of late, and I think overall you'll be fine. I don't think other people are still thinking about this. I think I'm kind of the last of this train, but you cannot learn and grow from a situation by sweeping it under the rug. And I predict that this will come up again, especially if you make a mistake that's similar in the future, which if you're not learning and growing is very likely. So in order to avoid that, you have to recognize the mistake that you made. And when you avoid doing so, that's when we start to think that it wasn't a mistake at all and that was your intention. You're gonna get backlash either way, but the backlash from this being a mistake that you apologize for will end at some point. The backlash that you get, if this becomes an even longer pattern of behavior, is just not gonna stop. Social media is not the same as Hollywood. And while it's true that still nobody on the internet is being permanently canceled at all, internet doesn't forget. When Shane Dawson got canceled most recently, so much stuff from his past came up, not as like a gotcha, but as like a, oh, you're still continuing bad behavior, and oh, wow, your last apologies weren't actually that genuine. And oh, this old clip, why did nobody ever talk about this before? When you don't address things, you don't grow, you don't move on, your past will continue to haunt you. And sure, like maybe if you do grow and change, people will still bring up your past, but you'll know it within yourself that you have grown. Instead of getting defensive that, oh, I'm just getting canceled again and nobody likes me, which is kind of the direction that Shane took. So it's not using your past against you. It's calling on a pattern of behavior. And when you don't correct that behavior, we are, as the audience, entitled to call out a pattern of behavior and talking about it. So do you want to do this the easy way? Do you want to do this the hard way? And I don't mean that in a threatening sense, because that does sound threatening, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is only you, Christy Carlson Romano, have the power to make the decision that ensures a future free from this haunting you. Silencing it is not going to do that. It'll be temporary that you won't have to deal with it, but it'll come back because you'll make another mistake.
Christy, you should just be able to apologize. There's nothing wrong will come out of you just apologizing. You're human. Apologizing is doing the right thing. You have to take accountability for your actions. We all do. It's part of being human. And the more that we're able to do that, the more that we are able to connect with one another and change the fucking world. And I know Christy wants to change the world. I know she's had her own trauma from being a child star. So let's do it together. What are you doing? It's so simple. Just call. Just call, make an apology. Make a public apology. Be so radical you make a public apology and own up.
Thank you for watching my first commentary style video on this channel. I have decided that I don't really want to niche this channel too much. I just kind of want to do commentary on a lot of different topics. But that being said, because I don't want to niche this channel too much, I do have 2 other channels coming out in the new year. One of them is going to be about astrology, more astrology content that I'm really excited for, and some Marvel stuff as well, not just MCU, because I'm getting a little bit tired of MCU, but like comics and stuff like that, and maybe expanding into other superhero stuff. Those are 2 special interests that I have that are going to be on 2 other channels that are coming out next year. But beyond that, this is going to be where all the general commentary stuff is. I was working on a releasing video, and then I got a job, I moved, and then I started working on this. So basically that it was just going to be like a retrospective of the criticism surrounding her talk show. But not all of them are going to be drama centered. I have an abolition video that I'm working on as well. A lot of different things that I want to talk about, because when it is a drama topic, I do want to kind of put it into broader implications like I did today. So anyway, yeah, I have a super long list of videos that I want to make, and I'm excited to finally be making them. So that's all I have. Bye.